What if everything you believed about Hollywood was a lie? What if the glamorous faces you adored were hiding the darkest betrayals imaginable? Tonight, we unravel the shocking scandal of Blake Lively and the web of deceit, manipulation, and destruction that has left fans stunned and enemies celebrating brace yourself. Because once this story begins, there is no turning back. So to me, it was never about simple misunderstandings or petty disputes. It was always about something much darker, much heavier, something that cut deep into the very soul of Hollywood. Because when we talk about Blake Lively, we are not talking about just another celebrity with a polished smile. We are talking about a woman who built an empire on the illusion of perfection, who held herself high above the crowd, as though untouchable, as though immune to the chaos that consumes everyone else. And yet behind the glimmering facade, there were cracks that began to spread and bleed until the entire structure threatened to collapse. And when the truth started leaking out, it did not come in soft whispers. It came in explosive shouts, in violent accusations and evidence so disturbing it forced even the most loyal fans to question everything they thought they knew. Because at the center of it all was a twisted web of lies and manipulation. A carefully orchestrated narrative designed to shield Blake from consequences and to frame her as the eternal victim, while others were painted as monsters and enemies. And in this tangled mess of betrayal, one name kept returning again and again. James Vizuka, a supposed journalist, a supposed truth teller, a man who claimed to stand for integrity, but who instead became a pawn, a weapon in this dirty game. And as messages leaked and statements contradicted themselves, as timelines were twisted and reality was rewritten to serve the agenda, people began to see through the act. They began to see the strings pulling the puppet. They began to see that this was no accident. This was no coincidence. This was deliberate. And as Blake and her allies pushed their narrative louder and louder, the evidence of deceit grew heavier and heavier until it was impossible to ignore. Yet still they pushed. Yet still they demanded sympathy and applause, as though the world should bow at their feet while the victims of their games were left bleeding, discarded, forgotten. But the universe has a way of snapping back, of forcing truth into the light no matter how hard it is buried. And that is exactly what happened here when the legal system itself turned its gaze upon the chaos, when the judge finally had to address the madness. It was like the veil had been ripped away because Blake had walked into that courtroom, expecting to win, expecting to charm her way through, expecting to emerge as the untouchable goddess once more. But instead, the judge scolded her. He saw the cracks, he saw the contradictions, he saw the improper filings, the manipulation, the attempt to twist justice itself into a personal weapon. And in that moment, the illusion shattered for everyone watching, because no amount of designer gowns or perfect smiles could mask the stench of desperation pouring from her case. And behind her stood James Vizuka, whose credibility had already crumbled into dust, a man who deleted his own evidence, who contradicted his own statements, who had the audacity to present himself as a voice of truth, while the facts proved him a liar. And it was not just about one false report or one misleading article. This was about a pattern, a deliberate strategy to smear, to attack, to weaponize lies against others while shielding Blake from scrutiny. And the more the story unfolded, the more grotesque it became, because every time a new detail emerged, every time another message surfaced, every time another contradiction was exposed, it pulled the audience deeper into the nightmare, deeper into the realization that the woman they once worshipped, the actress they once adored, was not the victim but the orchestrator, the manipulator, the one pulling the strings behind the curtain. And the tragedy of it all was that the machine of Hollywood still protected her. The industry still turned its head. The fans still fought to defend her, as though blinded by the image they had fallen in love with, refusing to see the monster rising behind the mask. But reality does not care for illusions. Reality will always pierce through. And the more Blake fought, the more the truth bled out, staining every corner of her empire and forcing the world to confront the horrifying possibility that this was not just about one scandal. This was about a woman who had been lying, manipulating, and destroying for years. With a smile on her face and a camera flashing in her eyes, more grotesque the layers become. Because by now it is no longer just about Blake Lively trying to protect her image. It is about the calculated destruction of anyone who dares to speak against her. It is about the way she and James Vizuka crafted their lies with surgical precision, turning truth into a weapon, twisting timelines, reshaping conversations until nothing could be trusted anymore. And the audience who once defended her began to feel that crawling unease in their stomachs as though something was terribly off. Because how could the narrative keep shifting? How could the evidence keep disappearing? How could sworn statements crumble under the weight of contradiction? Unless there was deliberate manipulation happening behind the scenes, and every time someone tried to expose the lies, they were met with ridicule, they were painted as villains. They were attacked by Blake's loyal defenders who could not accept that their queen, their untouchable starlet, was capable of such betrayal. And yet, piece by piece, the puzzle revealed itself in the shadows. Messages that vanished only to be recovered, whispers from people inside the industry who admitted they had seen the games but were too afraid to speak out. The web grew larger and uglier, until it became undeniable that this was not one mistake. This was a pattern, a cycle of deceit repeated again and again and again. And the more the cycle was revealed, the more desperate Blake became. Her filings grew more frantic, her arguments more hollow, her reliance on James more absurd. And yet she pushed forward like a gambler who refuses to walk away, even as the house burns around her. Because the only thing worse than losing was admitting the truth that she had built her empire on a lie. And as the judge dissected her claims, as the courtroom echoed with the weight of reality, there was no more hiding. The improper filings were not just sloppy, they were manipulative. They were designed to distort justice itself. And when the judge called her out, it was a thunderclap that tore through the illusion, leaving her bare in front of the world. And yet the most haunting part was not the courtroom, it was not the legal documents. It was the human wreckage left behind, the reputations smeared. The voices silenced, the innocent people dragged through the mud while Blake posed for cameras, smiling as though she were untouchable, because at the heart of her strategy was the belief that image mattered more than truth, that fans would protect her more fiercely than facts, that Hollywood would always shield its darlings no matter the cost. And for years perhaps that was true, but now the cracks had spread too far now. The truth was oozing out through every fissure, unstoppable, undeniable, unrelenting. And the audience who once cheered her began to see her with new eyes. Eyes filled with betrayal. Eyes filled with rage. Eyes that demanded accountability. Because what she had done was not just reckless. It was cruel. It was vicious. It was the calculated assassination of character for the sake of her own survival. And that is a cruelty that cannot be forgiven. And yet the story refused to end, because every revelation gave birth to another question. Every answer birthed another doubt. And the cycle of suspense looped again and again, dragging viewers deeper into the abyss until they could not look away, even if they wanted to. Because once you see the monster behind the mask, you cannot unsee it. Once you hear the lies unravel, you cannot unhear them. And once you realize that the person you adored has been manipulating you all along, you cannot return to blind devotion. And that is why this scandal is so dangerous, so unforgettable, because it forces everyone to confront the reality that Hollywood is not a dream factory. It is a factory of illusions, where even the brightest smile can hide the darkest rot. And in that darkness, Blake Lively was no longer the golden girl. She was the architect of chaos, the destroyer of trust, the villain disguised as a victim. And the more we watched, the deeper the hatred grew. Not just for what she did, but for how she did it. With arrogance, with entitlement, with a smug confidence that she would never be caught. And yet here she was caught in the open, bleeding credibility by the second, and taking James Bazooka down with her, his lies exposed, his contradictions laid bare, his credibility annihilated. Forever. And together they stood like crumbling statues once worshipped, now despised, their empire reduced to rubble, their legacy tainted beyond repair. And still, the story loops still, the whispers grow still, the outrage builds, because every day, someone discovers another piece of the puzzle, and the fire reignites, pulling us all back into the storm, reminding us that the fall of Blake Lively is not a closed chapter. It is an endless nightmare replaying itself again and again until the entire world cannot help but watch her empire burn. And now, as the storm rages on, we begin to see the true depth of the nightmare. Because what once seemed like isolated lies now spreads like a disease, infecting every corner of Blake Lively's world. Every friendship, every relationship, every piece of her carefully curated public image crumbling under the weight of deception and betrayal. Because when a person builds their empire on lies, there comes a time when the lies collide with reality, and reality does not bend, no matter how powerful. The name, no matter how polished the smile, and so the mask continues to crack wider and wider until everyone can see the monster hiding beneath it. A monster that smiles while destroying others. A monster that laughs while reputations burn and all. The while James Bazooka stands by her side like a loyal servant, spewing contradictions, deleting evidence, rewriting timelines as though the world is blind, but the world is not blind. The world is watching every second, every slip, every shred of dishonesty. And the world is enraged because people who once gave their love, their loyalty, their admiration, feel betrayed, feel cheated, feel used, and that anger grows heavier with every revelation. Because this is not a simple scandal. This is psychological. Warfare against the truth, a deliberate attack on the very concept of honesty and integrity, and when fans realized they had been weaponized, that their love had been twisted into a shield to protect Blake from consequences, the betrayal cut even, deeper than anyone could have imagined. Because it was not just about lies, it was about manipulation of millions of hearts, millions of minds, millions of souls, who believed they were supporting a star with grace and kindness, only to discover they had been cheering for someone who was tearing others down to stay afloat. And the cruel irony of it all is that Blake played her role so perfectly, she cried when she needed to. She smiled when it suited her. She painted herself as the victim as though the entire world were conspiring against her, but the evidence screamed louder than her tears. It roared through the silence and forced people to confront what they did not want to see. And yet she refused to stop. She doubled down. She fought harder. She filed more claims. She twisted more words. But every move exposed her further. Every desperate attempt to regain control only pushed her deeper into the abyss, until the spectacle was no longer about defending her image. It was about watching her unravel in real time, and that unraveling became addictive. The audience could not look away because each day brought new revelations. Each day, another mask fell. Each day, another piece of the puzzle showed the ugly face of the truth, and the suspense loop trapped everyone in its claws because you could not leave without knowing what came next. You could not stop without discovering how deep the lies went, and the deeper we looked, the darker it became. Whispers of backroom deals. Whispers of intimidation, whispers of silencing those who dared to speak. The story evolved from scandal to horror, because it was no longer about one person's lies. It was about the machinery of Hollywood itself, protecting the illusion, feeding the deception, all to maintain a profitable narrative. But the machinery is failing. The gears are grinding, the walls are collapsing, and at the center of the wreckage stands Blake and James. Cornered, exposed, despised by the very public they once controlled, and the hatred burns hotter each day because betrayal has a way of fueling rage more powerful than any ordinary scandal, and people now want accountability, they want justice, they want to see the fall. Completed, not half-finished, not hidden away, but fully exposed so that every lie, every manipulation, every cruel strategy is dragged into the light and crushed. And still the loops continue, still the revelations unfold, still the story refuses to end, because the deeper you dig, the more you realize there is no bottom, only an endless pit of deceit and corruption, and that endlessness keeps the world watching, keeps the outrage alive, keeps the fire burning hotter and hotter until it threatens to consume not only Blake and James, but the entire system that enabled them. And that is why this scandal matters. Why it shocks, why it terrifies. Because it shows us that beneath the glamour and the lights, Hollywood is not a dreamland, it is a battlefield. And in this war, Blake Lively has shown herself. Not as the hero, but as the villain, hiding behind her beauty, hiding behind her fame, hiding behind her fans, and yet unable to escape the truth that now stalks her every move, every word, every breath. And now we reach the breaking point where the walls of illusion are shattered beyond repair, and the darkness that Blake Lively tried to bury is no longer hidden, because it rises like smoke through the cracks, suffocating every corner of her empire, until the truth becomes inescapable and unbearable. And the world sees her not as the graceful shining star they once adored, but as the architect of devastation who built her throne on lies, betrayal, and cruelty. And the devastation is not silent. It is loud. It is deafening. It is the roar of millions, of voices screaming in unison, demanding answers, demanding justice, demanding that the curtain be torn away once and for all, because how many people were dragged down for her survival? How many reputations burned while she smiled for the cameras? How many lives were broken while she stood on red carpets pretending to be pure, innocent, untouchable? And the questions keep looping, spinning endlessly through the minds of those who watch, because every answer leads to another horrifying realization. Every revelation opens another door into a darker room, and the deeper we go, the more grotesque it becomes. Because James Vizuka, once seen as her loyal defender, now appears as nothing more than a pawn. A willing pawn who sold his integrity for a place at her side, and his fall is as brutal as hers. His credibility ripped apart. His reputation shredded, his name forever stained as a co-conspirator in the greatest deception Hollywood has seen in years. And yet the hatred burns more for Blake. Because she was the face. She was the icon. She was the one millions believed in, and to betray, that belief is unforgivable. It is worse than failure. It is worse than scandal. It is the calculated theft of trust. And when trust is stolen, it leaves behind a wound that never heals. And so the audience watches not with curiosity, but with fury, with vengeance, with a hunger to see the empire burn until nothing remains. And every moment of this collapse is addictive, because the loops of suspense will not let go. Because just when you think you have seen the worst, another revelation explodes. Just when you think the truth has finally reached its end, another darker layer is revealed, and it keeps going deeper and deeper until the audience is trapped, unable to look away, unable to breathe, unable to stop watching. Because the story has taken them hostage, and that hostage state is exactly the prison that Blake built for herself, because she cannot escape it either. She cannot silence it, she cannot erase it, no matter how many false filings she makes, no matter how many crocodile tears she sheds, no matter how many desperate performances she delivers for the cameras. The storm does not end. It grows and grows, consuming her reputation, consuming her legacy, consuming the illusion of Hollywood perfection, until she is left naked before the world, stripped of charm, stripped of credibility, stripped of every lie she once used as a shield. And now the rage against her is not fleeting. It is permanent, because the betrayal was too deep, too personal, too savage. And once betrayed, the human heart does not forgive. It demands blood. It demands destruction. It demands that every stone of the empire she built be smashed to dust. And the hatred repeats like an echo, looping louder and louder in the minds of those who were deceived. And each loop pulls more people in until the scandal is not just a story. It is a movement. It is a reckoning. And it does not stop. It will not stop until Blake Lively's name is synonymous with lies, until her legacy is reduced to rubble, until her mask is remembered not as beauty, but as deceit. And that memory will not fade. It will haunt her forever, and it will haunt Hollywood forever, because it reveals the sickness at the core of the Dream Factory. A sickness that rewards manipulation, that shields deceit, that glorifies illusion, until it collapses under the weight of its own corruption. And in that collapse, Blake is the face, the symbol, the warning, and the punishment all at once. And so the audience loops again, watching the fire grow, watching the empire fall, watching the villain unravel piece by piece, while knowing deep down that no matter how shocking it gets, the darkest chapter may still. And now, as the dust settles, we are left with the bitter taste of betrayal and the haunting reminder that nothing in Hollywood is ever as it seems. Because the story of Blake Lively is not just the story of one actress caught in a storm. It is the story of an entire system built on masks and illusions, a system that rewards lies and punishes truth, a system that turns the hearts of millions into weapons of manipulation, and the weight of that realization is crushing. Because the audience trusted, they believed, they adored, they gave their loyalty, and in return, they were handed nothing but deceit, and that wound will never heal, because betrayal does not fade. It carves itself into memory, it burns itself into the soul, it lingers long after. The headlines disappear, and that lingering pain becomes fuel for rage, for anger, for the endless demand for justice. And so the loops will not end, the story will not die, the fire will not burn out. Because once the mask has been ripped away, the world cannot pretend it did not see what was revealed, and what was revealed is darker than anyone imagined. It is a tale of ambition without conscience of power, without mercy of beauty used as a weapon of manipulation and destruction. And as the credits of this nightmare begin to roll, the audience is left staring at the wreckage, unable to turn away, unable to forget, unable to forgive, because the fall of Blake Lively is not just a scandal, it is a warning.